Hey, this is Eric Steelberg, and you're listening to the Cinematography Podcast.
The following podcast contains explicit language. You're listening to the Cinematography Podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image and the people who make it happen. Coming to you from the world headquarters of Hot Rod Cameras in Hollywood, California, are your hosts, Ben Rock and Ilya Friedman.
Hey, welcome back to the Cinematography Podcast. Ben Rock, it's time for another fine episode. Who is on the show today?
Today on the show, we have Eric Steelberg, DP of Saturday Night.
Yeah, returning.
And basically Jason Reitman's main guy. He's worked with Jason on most of his films. So he's done a lot of other really cool stuff. But Saturday Night, really cool movie. I went and saw it opening weekend in the theater. I'm kind of a Saturday Night Live fanboy, and including like just kind of the history of Saturday Night Live and all the various people who are on it. So it's a really cool movie, but also like I think it's a cool movie from its basic construction, almost like a French farce, slamming doors, kind of like nonstop torrent of crazy coming at you the entire runtime. It's a really well designed film for that, with great characters and people who went on to become major stars like Chevy Chase, and then fell from grace like Chevy Chase.
Eric and I had a really great conversation. I believe it was for Ahsoka, months and months ago. I'm really glad that you got to chat with him this time.
Yeah, super cool guy.
And I can't wait to listen to the interview.
And now, Close Focus.
But first up, we have to talk about our close focus.
Oh boy.
There is a lot of things going on right now in the industry. Where would you like to start? Where should we start this?
Well, I think we should start with something that I think is something that definitely points to trends that are coming in the future. And it's something I didn't personally watch, but it was the Mike Tyson-Jake Paul fight, which it was impossible not to hear about it. It was impossible not to know about it. And as maybe a crotchety person of my particular age, I was like, I just hope that Mike Tyson gives that YouTuber guy a what for. But as it turns out, I guess Jake Paul won, but it was like not a knockout. It doesn't sound like it was a very exciting fight. But also, notably, there were like massive technical problems with Netflix during the fight. There were outages, which,
It seems like it was kind of luck of the draw who got to see it live. And it was 65 million people trying to watch it at its peak. And it sounds like Netflix can handle about half of that. This is actually kind of a really important big deal because the NFL is going to Netflix. And if people can't tune in to watch the Super Bowl, I mean, really Netflix treated it sort of like a giant commercial for Netflix. And they took like Netflix stars of other shows and things and kind of put them in the audience, and they worked in all these commercials. It was a big commercial for Netflix. That's not going to fly for the NFL. It's going to have to be about the NFL, and it's going to have to be about seeing the game. It can't be the winning touchdown pass is about to be caught and then it goes frozen and pixelated. That's not going to fly for people. So
yeah, and it's funny because like whenever it was maybe a year and a half ago when Chris Rock did his live special. Like you can see them scaling up the technology to pull this stuff off. So Chris Rock does a live special, and I think it went off without a technical hitch. This has a much bigger audience. It went off with a noticeable technical hitch. And if they don't figure it out, you're absolutely right. The NFL people are not going to put up with that. I think they're called football fans. I'm not sure. I'm not one of them.
They've done a couple others too. They did a Tom Brady special.
Oh yeah,
they did a Love Is Blind reunion. They've done a couple other live streaming things that also exceeded their capacity, so they have to do. I don't think any of them were as noticeable perhaps as the Tyson Paul fight, but they're gonna have to upgrade something, and I think that there might be some limitations of what they can do. I don't know what the
have they tried turning Netflix on and turning it off and then turning it back on.
Turning on and turning off, turning off and turning on. Yeah, I don't know, but it's a good question. So Ben, Besides the Paul Tyson fight, one of the things we were talking about before coming online was generative AI getting a new studio. Do you know about this?
Yeah,
Is this,
yeah. Well, I mean, I think we both looked at the same Deadline article, but Peter Chernin, who has owned a YouTube, I don't know, like an aggregator called Full Screen that has made a lot of original stuff, and I actually have pitched at Full Screen a couple of times. He's a multi-gajillionaire, and he's putting money into studio that's fusing AI. Supposedly, they're saying they're bringing in AI and live action people. I always feel like
he's old school Hollywood royalty though too.
Yeah.
He was like head of Fox, but like when Avatar and Titanic both got greenlit.
Yeah,
So it's
I applaud anyone trying to figure out what this is. But I think that this is my prediction, and probably a lot of people will scream and throw stuff at their at their phone if they're listening to it. Throw it at their ears, throw it forcefully at their AirPods. But like, I kind of feel like AI is not going to be good at making TV shows and movies. It's going to be good at making another kind of entertainment that it's going to evolve into its own thing. Does like AI-driven entertainment supplant movies and TV shows? Maybe, I hope not, but
no,
that kind of thing could happen. But I mean, to me, it's like video games. You could point to the popularity of video games and say, like, they're very popular. People love them, and I love them, and there's nothing wrong with video games. People don't stop watching movies or stop wanting to watch movies because video games exist. There are obviously a finite number of hours in the day and a finite amount of money in your bank account to pay for whatever entertainment you want. But I just feel like hopefully their focus on it is like, let's see what this is gonna be, as opposed to let's use this to make movies, because I think that might be a losing battle.
Yeah, I think that there is some hope for AI and animation. And I think that animators in particular might be fairly worried about that. But it's in the same sort of vein as like, video game cutscenes. Almost anything that's coming out AI right now doesn't have a lot of lip movement. It's not intention. It's stuff that's supposed to be photorealistic. Everything else that seems to be successful is far more leaning into the animation aesthetic. And then everything that's trying to be reality has, I think, some of the worst sort of uncanny valley. So it is interesting that big players and some money is coming in to try to, I guess, see where this can go. It's all very speculative. There's something about, winning the lottery aspect or winning at roulette or something with the entertainment industry. And I know that the upside can be really big. I don't know what's going to happen with this. This new studio called Promise is saying that they're going to be nurturing AI filmmakers and working with existing IP and trying to do some interesting stuff. Look, they've got powerhouse people behind it. We'll see what happens. I'm not exactly sure. Disney set up an AI division. Lionsgate has got a partnership with Runway AI. There is a lot of
it's academic that it's going to become a tool in the toolbox. Like when you see what Runway ML is able to do with performance capture, for instance, which honestly is not crazy different with what MetaHumans does in Unreal Engine, but it's doing it easier and it's doing it with less technology. And it's making, Gollum-esque creations affordable, accessible. So you could create a character using whatever. You could use AI. You could use Midjourney or Stable Diffusion or whatever to like make your character. And then you could bring it into Runway ML and have a real performance power. To me, that it's like the things that I think AI is never going to get perfect are performance and writing. I think that, is it going to get used as a tool in those things and in all things? Probably. Like, there probably will be no stage of this where machine learning doesn't play in to how we do whatever it is we're doing. But I don't believe that we're going to be like, hey, I'm just going to go watch this movie that the robot made up entirely out of whole cloth.
And, I think really interesting, though, we should probably get into sort of our final bit of like the news roundup, which is Terrifier 3's marketing. Did you also look at that same article from,
well, I actually
IndieWire?
heard an interview a month or two ago with Chris McGurk that was on, yes, I did look at there's an article on IndieWire about it. but Chris McGurk was on. I want to say it was either The Business or The Town. And I actually, he would never remember me, but I had a pitch meeting with Chris McGurk years ago. Nice guy. And but basically, I feel like the Terrifier 3 success is something that a lot of people are going to try and replicate, and few people are going to succeed at replicating, because firstly, you have a very passionate, driven filmmaker on Terrifier who created. We could discuss the.
But let's tell our listeners. Let's tell our listeners why Terrifier 3's marketing is so
well. They
noteworthy.
Spent nothing on it. They spent, according to themselves, under $500,000, and the movie made like, I think, $70 million theatrically.
80 at this count. Yeah.
So that's all cool, but it's because Cineverse has an entire network of podcasts, and they've been sort of organically and not organically seeding Terrifier stuff. But also, this is the third installment of this clown-led tour of the human circulatory system. And
it's also unrated, which a lot of other studios don't want to touch an unrated movie, but they really leaned into the whole like unrated thing.
It's if you've seen either the first or second Terrifier, you know that the attraction to this is that it's going to go places that no other movie is going to go. And I think it's interesting that, basically it didn't, I do think it outgrossed Joker 2.
It did,
which was made for $200 million, and by the account that I have heard, Terrifier 3 was made for $5 million.
The thing I read was 2. So yeah, I know.
I believe. Well, here's the thing too: is the director behind these movies is freaking amazing, and he's able to make a movie that looked like the first Terrifier. I think cost $85,000, and if you watch it, you'd be like, yeah, that looks like a $500,000 movie. Then the second one was made for like $250,000. And if you watch it, you'd be like, yeah, that looks like a $5 million movie. And I have not seen the third one. I will eventually, but I haven't seen it quite yet. But here's what I can tell you. Art the Clown is iconic in the same way that Michael Myers or Freddy Krueger is iconic. And I know this because when I went to like the local Party City near my house for $300, you could buy an Art the Clown yard standee. Somebody thinks there's real money in this, and Art the Clown is a great, interesting, iconic character. But I do think that there's with Cineverse, there's kind of a new approach to how to build an audience and how to basically feed and nurture your fan base, and then give them what they want. It's the craziest thing that actually just works.
And it's really interesting too, because they've done it through niche marketing only. They've really doubled down. They've really gone hardcore into the niche advertising. And so I feel like this is almost like the Moneyball sort of sabermetrics, that if studios aren't paying attention to this for their big theatrical releases, they are missing huge opportunities, and they're going to get outperformed by people who understand how to target their audience in advance, rather than just saying everyone's our audience. We're gonna spend, tens of millions of dollars.
And the Terrifier movies are not 4-quadrant movies.
They're not. They're very specific.
Yeah.
So,
but it's a specific audience that I feel like doesn't get served quite like that very often. And again, we can debate the merits or lack thereof of the Terrifier movies themselves. I think they're cool. I don't. It's not necessarily my exact jam, but also like in a way, they're almost everything that people who hate horror movies complain that horror movies are. They were like, up yours. We're just going to make only that, and that's what it is. And I can't blame them. And moreover, it really has carved out. I mean, when's the last time? Seriously, what was the last major horror icon that came on the scene? I mean, I feel like the 80s were lousy with them, and you had like Chucky and Candyman, I guess is the 90s, but Pinhead, Freddy Krueger, et cetera, et cetera. And we haven't really had a horror icon, and people love it. There's a reason people like that stuff, and we haven't been really serving that.
I was going to say Jigsaw, maybe. So.
Jigsaw for sure, yeah. Well, I do think the Saw movies, and I would say even more than Jigsaw the character, the weird little clown puppet that he has, or I don't know if it's a clown, but the weird puppet that Jigsaw has is sort of the emblematic kind of logo of that. But yeah, I would definitely, I agree with you. But I feel like Art the Clown is like more like Freddy Krueger than he is like Jigsaw. He's not proposing a moral quandary for you. The moral quandary is you were in the world with Art the Clown, and now we're going to see what the inside of your skull looks like. True story. That's just what the movie's
Oh, wow. All right. Well, Ben, if you haven't seen this movie, next time I'm in town, maybe we should go see it.
Go see Terrifier. Oh, I would pay money just to watch it with you, man.
Okay, great. So, Ben, I think that totally wraps up all of the major sort of things that have been going on this week in entertainment. Why don't we get to the interview with Eric Steelberg?
Here we go.
The Cinematography Podcast interview.
Well, cool. Thank you so much for coming back. It's great to have you back.
Good to be here. Thanks, man.
So, Saturday night. Firstly, I love the movie. I'm a huge fan of Saturday Night Live. It's an interesting thing to tackle from a cinematography standpoint because it's a very recorded, like it's easy to search this and see what really happened. It's easy to go into the reality of it. So when you were starting, was there a reliance or any kind of marching orders from Jason Reitman or anyone to like how much to adhere to the actual reality? How did you gauge that stuff?
That's a great question. And the truth is that the movie is not a literal recounting of what happened that night. Jason and Gil took interviews from people who were there that night who all had different versions of what happened that night.
Yeah.
And they kind of compiled it into a script that is parts from opening night and parts of other nights from the first season and maybe even the second season. And I think we realized that the most important thing was to capture the feeling of what it was like to be there that night versus the literal retelling of what was there. The events themselves weren't as important as the feeling was. And so what do we need to do to get that feeling right? Because that's what the audience is going to latch on to. How do we insert people into that night? And then, the events and what happened came secondary to that.
And like, how much did you study? I mean, like how close were, and this is more of a production design question, I guess, but it figures into the cinematography, the actual like layout of the soundstage. 'Cause like the movie takes place vastly in the confined area of the soundstage and the offices around it, and like it's almost real time. So we're kind of stuck in this one area. How close are we to what like the actual place looked like in what was it 1975?
Oh yeah, we're almost 1-to-1. I mean, Jess Goncher, who actually was our production designer and actually worked I think as a set builder on Saturday Night Live in his early
Oh wow,
when he was in New York. We're basically a 1-to-1 recreation.
Oh wow.
Yeah, certainly on the 8th floor. I mean, the hallway, the on the long length dimension is a little bit shorter just to fit inside the soundstage. But for all intents and purposes, it's a 1-to-1. The studio is 1-to-1, most importantly. And the control room, I think, is actually maybe a little bit bigger on our set. But, and there's a couple of rooms we didn't include, closets and restrooms, things like that. But it's pretty accurate to what it was back then. And, we took cues from a lot of archival photos and video footage, not necessarily from that night, but for the first season, and created a color palette and textures that we thought would best represent the story and the experience of being there that night.
And it's always interesting to see like when you see how when there's a scene in a movie being made or a TV show or something like that where it's like you're basically filming the thing that you're a version of the thing you're doing in a sense, like you're representing how television is made. So how do you go about approaching that in a way that like, again, like how real are we trying to make it when we go into the control room? How do you go about making it have that feeling? Because there's like a claustrophobia to it that I think is inherent to a movie like this. The immediate comparisons I had were things like Birdman, obviously, but also like any like like I said, like a slamming door French farce where it's like one door slams and another character walks in and yells at the main character and then walks out and somebody else comes in, and it's like all very choreographed and timed. So like, what was the melding of those forces? What was that?
I mean, I think I understand what you're getting at. Like I think there was claustrophobia, but it wasn't from space. It was from time. It was the pressure of the ticking clock. I think that's what makes it feel claustrophobic, not necessarily the spaces. I mean, yes, there are spaces and frames that we try to make everything feel like it's surrounding Lorne in particular and putting downward pressure on him. In addition to the time that every which way he turns, he's he goes into a door he cannot open. He runs into groups of people who don't know who he is necessarily. I mean, it's all surrounding, and the goal was to show that within the frame, but also more importantly, create an energy, an ongoing energy that carried us through those 90 minutes leading up to it, and also heighten that time pressure. And I think that's kind of represented visually in the frames and the camera movement that we designed.
It brings up something interesting about like the downward pressure on him. Was there a lighting or a lensing, or was it mostly a blocking choreography kind of a thing that you did to kind of make him feel small? Like for anyone who's been involved in or paying attention to culture for all these years, Lorne Michaels is like this towering hero. He's a big deal. He's one of the big movers of culture, and here we're seeing him as like a young man who may not get his chance. Like this may get yanked away from him, and Johnny Carson reruns might be put in his place.
I mean, that's interesting. Look, I think there might be something to Jason casting Gabriel Bell. I mean, his stature, he's one of the shorter actors, and maybe that was either conscious or unconscious. I don't know. I never really thought of that. I think that's really interesting observation. And he is the shortest person, but the biggest personality, and running the thing, I think makes it all those stronger of a character. What do we do differently for him? I think he gets more singles and close-ups than anybody else in the movie. At least that I think was the intent. I have to watch it again to see if
to make us identify with him. I would think, it's like,
I mean, it really is his story. The night is supposed to be through his eyes. I think that's how it becomes most impactful. And when he's around other people, it's really important to be, wider, still staying close to him, but shooting wider to show everything going on around him, and, what they did with sound design too. And like hearing all the things, like he's just tracking everything at once is like 3-dimensional chess. He's got to be considering everything and thinking multiple steps ahead of everyone else. And that was just it wasn't like we didn't have specific conversations about like, how do we do that? How do we design it? It was more like, here's an idea of how we can represent that. Does this look right on this lens in this camera position? We move the camera from A to B to C or to D, or maybe there's a whip pan or whatever. Is that representative of what is going on at this moment, or where his headspace is at? It wasn't as, it wasn't, I'd like to say it was as intellectual as maybe you're suggesting, but it's not that. I mean, a lot of this had to come from like, what is it? What feels right? What looks right? What visual device is the right thing for this? And we spent a lot of time in pre-production. I say we, Jason and I, and some stand-ins, and later on at some point our camera operator joined us, and we shot the whole movie on an iPhone as the set was being built around us, trying to figure out these camera moves, trying to figure out how to keep this story from Lorne's point of view and keep it engaging and interesting and be a fly on the wall and feel that pressure, have that energy. And we'd try a bunch of different things. We just use, a viewfinder app on our iPhones, and then we would cut it together and just see if it felt right. And like literally, Jess, our production guy, was building the set around us. We're shooting in dark hallways or dark stairwells. Sometimes holding our iPhone lights on in these dark rooms that aren't lit yet, just so we can get a sense of, what this is going to be. Because obviously, if you're shooting a movie, or maybe not obviously, but if you're shooting a movie in these limited amount of spaces with all these things going on, revisiting a lot of these spaces very often with different characters, you need to figure out ways to keep it fresh, to keep the energy going and keep it interesting visually. And how does the blocking change? And are we making sure we're keeping the right point of view for any given scene? So, I mean, that's all kind of related as to the answer, I think, that you're looking for.
Well, and that kind of, I mean, that sort of answers sort of what my next question was, like, how do you prepare for something like this?
Jumping ahead. Well, it's hard because, it's all related. It's all like everything dovetails into one another, but.
Well, yeah, it's not a standard coveragey kind of movie.
No.
It's like, it's a very, it's very propulsive. Mm-hmm. And even though you're in the same rooms over and over again, like, it doesn't, I feel like every time we're in a room, we're discovering different angles in it, and we feel like we're in a different part of the story.
Yeah.
And when I'm looking at something like this, I mean, like, it's also just a crowded movie. There's so many people in it. And as a fan of Saturday Night Live or whatever, I'm looking at it and it's like, oh my God, it's Chevy. Oh my God, it's Gilda Radner. Oh my God, whatever. It's Dan Aykroyd. And even like when it settles with someone, it doesn't settle for long before it keeps moving. So it just feels like there's like a propulsion, a momentum that it's constantly moving into the next thing. And I'm just curious how you and Jason kind of built up to that. I mean, I guess, the idea that you were kind of test filming it with your iPhones, like, that's a good way to see which ideas are going to work. But like, what I guess what were your marching orders from Jason, or what were your discussions before you even got to that? How did you get to kind of the style of the film? Because it's not documentary style exactly, but it's
more about, our conversations were more about what we wanted to make sure, like what we didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And like you just mentioned, my thing was, how do we, particularly in light of wanting to shoot 16 millimeter, which I know we'll get to shortly, but how do we make it not feel like a documentary? I didn't want this to be like the Spinal Tap version of Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's not about doing a specific thing or not doing a specific thing. It's more about just like, let's keep this in our head. Let's be aware of it. And as long as we're aware of it and talking about it, we will stay away from certain things, because it is a narrative, and we are doing it from a point of view. We're not trying to make it feel like a documentary. It's a document of the night, but it's not supposed to feel like a documentary. It has a point of view. It's not the documentarian's point of view. This is Lorne's story being told. And again, like I mentioned before, it's us talking about in every scene about, like, where should the camera be? Like, where are we positioned best to tell this? Like, what lens are we using? Are we moving? Are we handheld? Are we on a dolly? Are we on a stabilized head? Are we on Steadicam? What is the best way to tell this scene? And those conversations with one another in prep, and on weekends, we'd meet every Sunday night. We'd have dinner and we would talk about the week and everything we had to shoot during the week. And we'd go over what we've been planning for the scenes we're going to shoot that week and say, okay, are we still good with this? Is this still what we want to do? Or do we need this many extras in the background? Do we want to bring in a lot of people, or is it more about a quiet moment? Or Jason saying, maybe we need to reconsider, like, how we want the lighting to, what we want the lighting to be in this scene. Maybe it's a little more spotlighting. Maybe it's like, I just want them in silhouette. I mean, lots of things like that. And it's all an ongoing conversation. It's very much, our creative approach to it is very much kind of like a living process, in that it was always changing and evolving based on what we were seeing happen in front of the camera and what we were shooting every day. I mean, we stuck to kind of our plan of, like, it doesn't want to be a documentary. We want to shoot 16. We want it to feel like a fly on the wall. We want to make a Lorne story. We want to have a very strong point of view for each scene. And beyond that, like, how we got there, we roughed in, like I said, in pre-production, doing we call them photo boards, but shooting video and stills ahead of time in lieu of storyboards to figure the whole thing out. We more or less stuck to that. But that also gave us the freedom to change the approach on the shoot day. But I'd say 90% of the movie, we stuck to what we had planned out in pre-production. And, partly it was technical. Like, we have a lot of long takes, and that requires a lot of planning, and
Especially like, I mean, like 16 millimeter maxes out at, like a 10-minute load for 400
yeah, a little
feet,
bit more
right?
than that. But I'm like, sure, like the film's going to roll out, like there's some of these hallways, like we didn't have walls that can move. Like some of these hallways are narrow, like will a Steadicam fit down it? Can Steadicam go up and down the stairs? And like all these different things, can it change direction quickly? Or can we go down the hall a certain speed on the dolly, without dolly track? Can we do these turns on dolly track? And can we actually do this long opening shot in there in one take? Or do we have to do it in stitches? Like, well, we really want to do it in one long take. What's it going to take to do that? And like, let's figure that out. So there was a lot of technical reason for having to plan out early, but there was also a lot of creative and narrative reason too. And those things relate to each other because the whole reason we were doing a lot of those long takes, for instance, was for narrative purposes. Like to be there again, going back to, like, I keep saying that word, but like the energy and the pressure of time. Like when you do these long takes, you can't fake it. You can't fake the fact that somebody or the camera is and the actors are going through these large groups of people and weaving out, and there's a blocking and there's like a dance. It's very theatrical. Like that all has to be planned. It's not actors, hitting 4 marks. It's like 60 actors, actually more. It's like 20 principal actors plus I think 90 background actors. Every single person had a mark. Shots, they all had to know where to go at any given time during those like 3.5, 4 minutes of that take, and it all had to be perfect. And on top of it, then we've got a moving camera, with focus and a dolly, and changing heights, and we're zooming in and out, we're changing focal lengths. There's all kinds of, and there's lighting cues happening that are hopefully imperceptible. There's a lot going on. So planning becomes, very important from a technical level. But again, driven by the narrative and creative.
So like, let's dive in a little bit more. Like when you're putting together like a giant oneer like that, where oneers sometimes sound like really enticing until you're in them, and it's like you get 93% of the way through and somebody moves in the wrong way and you have to start completely over. Like how long did you rehearse for it? Like what was the blocking like, and the dance specifically with like camera, lens, operator, even assistant camera, like what all is going into a giant complex oneer like that? Because that movie, I mean, it's got a couple of really, really complicated sequences that are, I didn't count the oneers, but there's several of them in there.
Yeah. There's definitely a handful of them, and the most complex being the opening one when they first come out of the elevator into the 8th floor. What goes into it? I mean, everything you can imagine. The thing I was telling somebody,
I guess, like, what's the order of operations? Do you like block the actors first, then bring in the camera?
No. Okay, that's a great question. What we did first was determine what we want the camera to do. Like, what do we want to see? Right. Well, Jason said, let's figure out where we want to go, what we want to see, what rooms and hallways and everything. And then the answer quickly became, well, as much as possible, because the more you can see, the more overwhelming it will feel.
Yeah.
And it wasn't going to feel overwhelming to the audience until we felt overwhelmed. So we basically started planning a shot. And once we got significantly terrified, we were like, okay, that's the shot, because like, we don't know how to do it. Like, and that now we know, like, that's what it's got to be. So again, the iPhone walked through it, and there went through many iterations, and we ended up rehearsing it the day before our first day of shooting on the set, full rehearsal. I'll call it full dress rehearsal with camera, the whole crew, all the background actors, assistant, everything. Spent the entire day before our first day of filming, rehearsing it. Camera, focus. I mean, everybody involved.
Was that oneer the first day? That was your first thing that you did?
It was, yeah. And then our first day of shooting was like, let's just knock this out, because for many reasons, because we needed a day. We needed a day to rehearse it. So what better day to do it than like the day before the first day of shooting? And but also it was really important to Jason to see, like, hey, this is the movie we're making. All the actors know, all the crew knows, like, this is the pace and level we're working at. Like, this is going to be a ride. Everybody's got to be on their game. I mean, this is like the Olympic team of filmmaking, like, or at least that was like the hope. I mean, that's what we wanted to project. Like, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be a fast shoot. It's going to be a lot going on. Everybody's got to pay attention and work at a very high level. So we spent the very first day doing that shot, and I would say, 17 takes in, we weren't getting it. Like, there's always something that didn't work. And at one point, we thought like, maybe we should just do it and break it up and do it with a stitch, which was really disheartening because nobody wanted to do it. We were so close. There's always like one or two things, and then we'd fix that, but the next thing, something else would happen. Right. And again, remember, like we're talking about like even the background actors, cranes moving in the studio, people saying lines in the background, like are set pieces moving in the right way, or
it's like a cuckoo clock, and everything has to move in the
furniture
exact right way.
blocking our lead actors in the hallways for too long. Did Chevy not trip in the right place? That actually didn't happen. I'm like making stuff up as examples, but or did we miss the focus, or did we miss the focal length, or did the camera get bumped? That happened, So we did it, and we actually got to 20 something takes, and we finally nailed it. We got one we loved. And that was that. Great. So everybody was thrilled, went forth with the film. And then as we were doing the film, we realized that, we were achieving things that we didn't know. We were getting very successful at things that we didn't know we would be very successful at in our minds. And I'm speaking mostly technically.
Like what?
Just camera moves. Like we were getting really invigorated with the way the movie was looking. The dailies were great. The camera moves were coming out great. The performances were great. We were just we were very happy at the end of every day. And at the last day of leading up to the last day of the shoot, Jason decided that, had the thought that, like, you know what? I think he had an idea that he could do something better with the opening shot.
Oh no.
Yeah. And that one thing better was like, the first version we did, this camera never actually went into the studio. You saw it through the doorway as a tease, and then we went down a hallway. Yeah. And he said, I really think the audience we need to go in. We're not changing anything. The camera needs to go into the studio, but then it'll duck down under the scaffolding. We just need to see more. Like, why are we teasing it? Let's just go in there. So he said, I want to redo that shot, but let's make it more complicated. So we did that. We spent the last day in our studio location on stage. We were doing that shot. I think we did, again, right around 20 takes. Again, and also very hard. It was like starting all over. It had been a while, a month and a half since we'd done that shot the first time. And as well oiled as we are, it was, still very challenging to get. And we finally got it the very last take on the last day. That was the last thing we shot, and that's what's in the movie.
That's crazy. So it's the first and last thing you shot in the movie. That's awesome.
First and last thing we shot, and literally, I think I could be wrong, but let's just go with it. I think the last take that we shot on stage of the movie was that take. That's actually in the film.
And when you get something like that, you're not going to go do another one for safety.
No, you don't. We're like, we even said, to do one for safety is like we've got 40 other safety take, and it's it's very exhausting. Like if you can imagine spending an entire shoot day on one shot, everybody hitting marks. I mean, you're fried, and you're looking for all these little things that could possibly go wrong. And it's not HD. We're looking at a video tap because we're film. So, there's a little bit of like, got to trust the operator, trust the focus puller, trust everybody else, the ADs, that like everything happened the way it's supposed to. It's super satisfying to do long takes. Yeah. Because like I said before, like you can't fake out an audience. It's really happening. You're really designing this stuff. It's like choreographing a really complex dance.
Yeah, it's like a stage play. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a lot of satisfaction because you're not cutting away, and we didn't stitch it. And everybody's, oh, did you stitch it? No, we didn't stitch it. So, and it's just like, again, and we put it at that point in the movie because like Jason said, he wanted to tell everybody, like, this is the ride we're going to be on, and this is how overwhelming it feels. Like, it's hard to hear people. It's like, there's a lot to look at. Sometimes you don't know where in the frame to look. And that's kind of the vibe. I mean, that's how confusing and chaotic it is.
Well, and doing 16 millimeter, more stuff is in focus, so like your eye can wander around, and everything has to be covered. Now, let me ask you, like you mentioned, like when you're doing dailies, and I don't know why I don't think I've ever asked anyone this question, but like, how are you doing dailies these days? Are you watching them with the crew? Are you watching them by yourselves? Is it an online screener, or like?
Sadly, it's on a laptop, you know, and if you need to see something bigger on a TV. It's
do you watch it like as a group, or do you and Jason watch them together?
No, individually.
I wonder if something's like been a little culturally lost from that, because I feel like I would always hear stories about, and they're making, The Godfather or whatever, and everyone who worked on it's in the room, and they can see what their performances are, and they see it on a big screen.
So, I mean, I think everybody watches dailies the first couple days, and then it ends up being me, the editor, and the focus puller, and maybe an operator watching dailies, and maybe a gaffer, and that's it. People just stop watching dailies. And Jason watches dailies sometimes at the beginning, but then would prefer just to look at cuts with the editor. I think he's not alone in this. I find this with most directors, that the process of watching dailies will get them in their own heads, or make them feel like they missed something, or they should have done something, and they don't want to be second guessing themselves after.
That's fair.
So they kind of leave it up to me to say, like, if there's a technical issue, let me know. Otherwise, it's between me and the editor. Like we're done with it. I already decided we're done with it, and we have what we need. And at this point, I don't want to deal with it until I'm in editing and fix it. Because if I see a problem, it's like, there's nothing to solve.
So let's talk about the 16 millimeter choice. Let's talk about that, because it's an unconventional thing to do. It's not out of the realm of possibilities. I think all of The Walking Dead was shot on 16 millimeter, and 16 looks great these days. Like what powered that choice?
It's not rare. It's not rare at all. And it's not uncommon, but it is rare and uncommon for a studio feature that's theatrical. So it's a lot TV, music videos, independent film, but going to a major studio and saying that you want to, put something in a theater, that's a lot of theaters, that's shot on 16 millimeter, big screens, does not get a good, excited or favorable response from them. And I think that's largely because of it's just the unfamiliarity with it, and because it's not done. I think there's an assumption if it's not done, there's a reason why it's not done. Look, I was apprehensive about it too. Like, I'll be honest. When Jason said it, I was like, let's great. I'm going to do some tests, but I'm also going to test 35. And the backstory to this is we did a movie in 2017 called The Front Runner, and it took place in the 80s as a political film. And we had originally wanted to shoot that on 16 millimeter, and we shot tests with that and 35, and we really wanted to do it, but we decided not to, and we shot 35. The reason we didn't was because we had a lot of big crowd scenes, and when we projected it, we thought that the size and amount of the grain on 16 made it too hard to see faces, and seeing people's faces and crowds reacting in this political movie was going to be really important. And we needed that extra resolution of 35. So we shot 35. But even when the movie came out and while we're shooting, we're like, well, she shot 16. Anybody that's shot 16 will always have a soft spot for 16. I don't care if they're the most diehard digital, ambassador these days, the biggest DP. I haven't talked to any cinematographer who hasn't admitted it, like, even if they're done with film, that like, I do miss 16. Like, it was such fun, right? There's nostalgia and romance to it. And so we shot our test for this, and loved the 16. What I suggested was that, well, if you really wanted to shoot 16, because we're in a controlled environment, what I'd do is I'd shoot on a lower speed stock, and that would minimize the grain that was problematic to us when we looked at it in our for the Front Runner. So we shot the whole thing on 200 ASA, which I had enough light to do because I was lighting the whole set with, largely with old tungsten incandescent lights, a lot of direct hard lighting too. So as soon as you start doing that, it makes it really easy to get, your f-stop that you need for the lower speed film. And it also gave us a lot of contrast, which is beautiful. And so we would look at this test of 16 and 35, and as every time we saw 16, you're like, it's not just the look, it's like, that's the feel. That's what I want it to feel like. And so Jason told the studio, said, we're going to shoot 16. I said, oh, that's great. Well, can we see the test that you've been doing? Sure. Sent them the test. They saw it in the theater, like, you're right, 16 looks beautiful. Love what you guys did on the test. But we prefer you shoot 35. And now we really want to shoot 16. And then they had a private conversation about, why it's important creatively, and that, why it will look polished enough to be a studio film and all these things. And I think partly, and I understand this, there was the concern that, it being a big studio film they're putting out, they don't want it to feel, and I think I heard somebody say this, I don't know who, or maybe it was just passing, or it was like secondhand, this idea that they don't want it to feel like indie. And I don't know what that means, to be honest, but
I don't either anymore. I think indies are shot on the Alexa LF all the time.
Exactly. But what I tell you, no, sure, early digital looks is the most indie thing I've ever seen. But I think there's this idea that it's grainy, it's unrefined, it's unpolished. They knew we were going to do handheld. Again, like I made that joke about Spinal Tap, but like they think it's going to look like a 16 millimeter documentary from the 70s, like medium cool or something. And it's just not going to. And like, that's not what we wanted to do. You can make anything look like anything, right?
Yeah.
It all depends on how you shoot it. And so I explained, like, listen, we're still lighting it. We're not like doing any weird exposure stuff. Like, we're doing this because of those things. We're doing it because it doesn't have the resolution. We're doing it because it's a little softer and it has a color palette. Like, all those things are going to put people into that moment and into that night much easier than anything else. It's cool. Well, can you just add, grain or do a post process on digital? It's like, sure, you can do anything. You can do all that. But how much time are you going to spend doing that? How much it's going to cost? It actually can cost you more to do that.
And optically, it would like, so much of what you're getting out of 16 is just kind of the frame that you're getting from the.
It's just there.
Frame.
Like, the movie looks exactly like the dailies did. It's more balanced and things match and whatever. But our DI took like a week and a half of actual coloring. It was the fastest color correction we've ever done. Like, because we just said, well, we love the dailies, just make it look like that. And it was like, okay, and then we just balanced it out. It was so liberating. So. And going backwards a little bit, so that's how we got to the decision of shooting 16. It was something we had already wanted in our hearts, and when we shot the test again, just to check ourselves against 35, it wasn't like, it was one like, look how close they are. It was like 16 actually looked really good, and if we were shooting something for to be on like TV, and it was never going to be a theatrical release, 16 would have been a much easier choice for everybody, because on TV, the difference between 16 and 35 on television or TV finish is not that great, but on a theatrical screen it is big. And we wanted that difference. We wanted it to be something different. I mean, there's so many, when everybody's shooting on the same cameras and in the same way, we're trying to tell a different story, or at least make it feel like a different story on a very special night. And everything about it's different. It's a different type of comedy. It's the night comedy changed forever. It's the night TV changed forever in a lot of ways. Like, why would we tell this story visually with the same brushes that everybody else is telling stories with? Like, this is our one chance we've had in our careers to try something different and new. And I'm not trying to make us sound like some sort of mavericks for, shooting on 16. We're not. It's just, we had an option to do something that was there. It's a great option. It's a beautiful option. And we felt like we should be allowed to do it. And, while we can, and we did, and we leaned into all the best things about it in every way we could. And that's essentially what it is. I mean, like, I fell in love with, I say this every time I show on film, but like, I fell in love with film all over again, and I love digital. I feel like the best things I've done, frankly, as a cinematographer, have been digital. But like, there is a DB told me, he's like, I think you're being a little too romantic about film. Like, it's not very practical. And I was like, what's wrong with being romantic about it? I mean, that's why we got into this business doing what we do. It is romantic. It's something that you can touch and hold and look through, and you can hear, and it clicks, and there's a smell to it, and all those things. It's like all these senses. You're just so close to it.
It's also people, like not horrifically
people get excited
impractical.
About it on set. And more importantly, like, it also changes. And I don't mean to sound like this big, evangelist. This is about the experience that we had on this film. But people get I mean, I can't tell you, everybody on the background, the actors, the crew, everybody's so excited. Oh, we're shooting on film. We're shooting on 16. Wow. Like, people got really, really excited about it. And you just don't get that in other ways. Even on 35, people are like, oh, the film, cool. You shoot 16. They're like, oh, wow. They know you're doing something different. And everybody now wants to contribute. And look, I think it is romantic. It's doing something new. And like, personally, one of the very first short film I ever shot wasn't on Super 8 or video. It was on 16 millimeter. It was on black and white 16 millimeter. And so, like, I got all the old feelings back, and it's really great. And being able to, like, shoot now with what I know versus what I knew when I was shooting short films as a teenager on 16 is so great. The film still doing its job, and it's just, it gives you back what you put into it. I mean, if you light up, it's just going to be the best version of what you're seeing and what you're doing. And it just looks so good. And I love the idea that the dailies are just, it's there when you see it. It doesn't have to go through all these hands to get it to a place that somebody or a group of people will decide is what's good in the final product. There's much more authorship in it, because you can't, to be honest, manipulate film as much as you can digital. So I think it's got our stamp, when I say our, me and Jason, on it, much more than other things we do, look-wise, and visually speaking. And
is there an essence too of, like, when you're looking at a video tap, it's an imperfect image?
Oh, it's terrible.
And on a digital set, everyone's staring at that monitor, and, like, people are, like, touching the monitor and pointing at, like, oh, do you see that? Like, that's a little too red, and what's going on with that flower over there? There's a thing over here, and like, because it's more of like a representation of what you're going to get, not what you're actually going to get. Do you feel like people fuss over it less?
People come to look at the takes, and then there's no hovering around the monitors in film. They come and they look and they leave. Digital, people, they call it, like, people, they camp out at the monitors. Yeah. Everybody, every department, hair, makeup, stuff. I mean, everybody, and they should be allowed to, by the way. I love it. I love the opinions, but it does become a thing where you look for more. It's a finished. You're looking at a more or less a final image with digital.
Yeah.
I mean, now you have, like, 4K monitors on set. Like, you're more or less, like, everybody's looking at, like, the final image, or something very close to it. And I think that's great, because as a cinematographer, you're giving people, like, a really good feeling. It looks very polished. Everybody feels good. It feels like the money's being well spent. It's all on screen and they can see everything. Yeah. But the downside of that is that everybody has an opinion, like, oh, that thing's not right. Oh, I actually see a strand of hair I want to fix. Strands of hair. The amount of times we've had to stop and pause to fix a strand of hair, or, a flaky piece of makeup or skin, or whatever, a little piece of tape, showing from under a lapel, or any of those things. And I'm not just making examples for those departments. It could be anything. Or, like, me noticing that, I'm seeing part of a flag sticking in a frame, or whatever it is that you just don't see on film. And you realize that, like, those things are still there and recorded, but that doesn't matter, because, like, the camera's moving, that digital image might be parked on a shot, but that part of the shot is actually gonna be a panning shot or something, Mm-hmm. People don't realize, like, oh, the camera's just stationary, right, ready to roll. Like, that's not actually the shot. And what you're paying attention to when you're shooting film is, like, you're paying attention to the story. You're paying attention to the narrative. You're paying attention to, like, what's the camera doing? What's the story we're telling? And that's it. Beyond that, you're just relying on everybody to do their jobs. The camera operator to look through the frame, make sure it's clear. The focus puller to make sure he's focused, got his marks. Me to make sure that the lighting's right and whatever. And I'm not going out there second guessing, maybe I should go a little darker. Maybe the key light. It's like, you know what? trusting my meter, trusting my eye, and it's much better for me. I actually get more stressed out when I'm shooting digital because I start second guessing myself on like lighting because everybody's commenting. I hear things, maybe I should go brighter, maybe I should go darker, maybe I should change the contrast, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Film, it's just like, you get the shot, everybody's good. Yep, let's roll. And every time I shot film, you shoot so much faster. I mean, the workflow of shooting film on set, it's like one cable for the monitor, a battery that's stuck on the camera that lasts, 5 hours, and that's it. Just go. Like there's, you don't have everything attached to it. It's just wonderful, and it's just so simple and so, developed in terms of a process. I mean, I'm sure people have anecdotes and opinions about what they think they might lose from possibly shooting film, like from a performance standpoint, like you might suggest, but I would go back and look at the history of the movies made and ask if any performances were, that was detrimental to any performances, the process of shooting film. And I'd say no, we just forget, which is fine. And again, this has nothing to do with digital, or this is not a digital film debate. This is like, hey, here are the tools we use. These are the, paintbrushes we use on this. And here's why it was fun to go back to them, So, it's like, everybody's been working, in Photoshop and Illustrator, and we went back to, paint and canvas, and then you could still do great work, Yeah. Is it maybe slower in some ways, but it's like, it can be tremendously expressive,
Mm-hmm.
No, it's awesome. And, sometimes I think about like when you're making a period film, sometimes I feel like the temptation is to evoke the period through, bad version, like too much filtration or whatever, like putting a sepia tone or whatever. And then there's like Ty West, a filmmaker whose work I really love. He'll make a movie set in the 80s and he'll shoot it on 16 millimeters, so it feels like a movie made in the 80s. And that was kind of how this felt. It felt like a film being made contemporaneously with when it was happening, when it was taking place, but filmed with the technology of its time, more or less. Like had that look.
Like I don't think it's as simple as like, oh, it's in the 70s, let's shoot something that was popular in the 70s. It was less that, and it was more about like, it was an analog time.
Yeah.
And there just happens to be a tool that was popular then that we think will help put the audience into that night just by virtue of what it is.
Yeah.
I'll also say that I think shooting film, it made me, I think the shot operating and shot designs would be the same, but lighting wise, I would have lit it totally different if it was digital.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, shooting film, this actually doesn't even have to do with 16 itself, although a little bit, because 16 forced the slower film speed, which required more light, which then led to, more hard light, which led to incandescence and very little LEDs.
Slower film speed because you wanted tighter grain, so you
That's
had
right.
the
tighter grain and more contrast. So it scared me into lighting in ways that I never have. Like I've never done something with as much hard light and direct light and undiffused light as I did on this. I would say, I don't know, 70% of the movie is all direct, hard, undiffused light, and learning how to do that, which is the way movies, I mean, they, until like Gordon Willis came along and Owen Wiseman, like every movie was all shot with, other than, a lot of British cinematography, there was everything was done with like hard direct light, and one of the reasons I think it's one of the reasons a lot of movies from back then looked that way, more so than the film stocks and whatever. And it scared me, but it also excited me. Like it forced me to do things that I'd never done, and didn't really have an interest in. But again, because there was a necessity, a technical necessity, it was the only solution I could find to fulfill that requirement for the film stock. So I got to learn and embrace and dive into something that I'd never done before. And that was really fun for me, because I don't think anything. My favorite part of this job is getting the opportunity to try new things. I think it is for all creative people in film. So you always want to try new things. You never want to repeat yourself, as successful as it might be to repeat yourself. It gets boring. Like it makes it hard to show up on set. Like the reward for working these long hours and, faraway places away from, friends and family is the satisfaction of succeeding at what you set out to creatively accomplish. And once you start doing the same thing over and over and over, I think that decreases, and that reward becomes smaller or non-existent. And I'm very fortunate, I feel, in that I've been able to sort of do a lot of new things with every project and scare myself into trying having to do new things. And whether it be like the size of the movie or VFX or night scenes or whatever it is. And I actually look for that when I'm considering new projects. It's like, do I get to try something new and something I haven't done before? And this was that movie, like, to the extreme. Going back to a format and a tool that I got started with on my very first short film, and that on a format that's, basically been around since the dawn of filmmaking. I don't know. I think I just find that amusing to me personally.
Do you think it'll affect your choices in the future? Do you think like the next film you have, you'll make a fight for it? Like I find that obviously there are people like Tarantino or Hoyte van Hoytema or whatever.
No, I don't think I'll be like, oh, the next film I'll be like, I want to shoot 16 or I want to shoot film. It won't affect that. It's given me the gift of having experience that has retrained my mind on visual storytelling and like what I can do, what I'm comfortable with, learning about how I like to tell a story visually and what I respond to. That's what it's given me. I think it's allowed me to talk about camera and visual storytelling differently than before I did the movie. I might be more inclined to suggest film, but I don't think that's the main thing it's given to me. Like, I mean, I loved it and I would love to shoot it again, but I wouldn't do it like if I thought that the project would be better on digital. I'm not going to say like, oh, you want to shoot a lot of night anamorphic and, there's not a big budget for lighting. And I'm not going to be like, well, we should shoot, 35 or we should shoot 16. I'm going to be like, no, that's crazy. We should shoot digital and like, it's going to be great. And I know I can do a good job on that. So like, I would never shoot it for, just the sake of it. It would have to be right because, that's the way it should be. Like, you should choose your tools for what's right creatively. You should never let it. We have more now. Cinematography has more choices now they've ever had between the film and the digital and the various kinds of digital and compressions and the cameras and sensor sizes and lenses. It's insane.
Well, it's great, but it also like causes anxiety. It's like, going down the grocery store aisle now versus 50 years ago.
So much to choose from, right?
Exactly. Like, hey, I want fruit punch. Oh, there's like 16 kinds of fruit punch. No, I just, and so, yeah, you want to get, a specific focal length, but like, oh, well, do you want Cook or Airy or Zeiss or, there's so many different ones to choose from.
And I had another friend say to me recently, like, you've got all these cameras, stuff to choose from, it's digital. Why do you keep shooting since the 2019, everything I've done has been on like an Arri LF anamorphic, it's like the same lens. Why do you keep doing the same thing? I'm like, I just love the combination,
Yeah.
It's like the chef that has the favorite spices and, whatever, when you find something that connects, and I'm like, oh my God, I finally found a camera lens combination that sees things the way I think they need to be seen. Like, it renders things exactly like my mind sees it or my eye sees it. Like, that's exactly what I want it to look like. And it's just whatever, that's the combination.
Well, going to 16, how did you change up your lens selection?
But that's what I'm saying is that like the 16 forced me out of that just by the time we're 16. So like I gave up so much I was comfortable with and so used to, and I love that I was forced into it. Because it just completely reset my brain.
Which lenses were like the ones that you landed on for this?
Well, we shot, actually there's a handful. So we had prime lenses. We used 35 millimeter format master primes, and we added some wider Ultra 16 Zeiss lenses, 16 format lenses to get wider in the primes. And then we had a Panavision. We went through Panavision for the camera package, and we used a Panavision Canon 8-64 zoom lens. And then we also used a 35 millimeter format Fujinon 18-85 Premiere zoom. That was a T2. And I'd say those two zooms shot most of the movie.
Do you do any of the operating, or do you work with operators?
No, I work with operators, yeah. I mean, there was one day where I insisted on putting a C camera on my shoulder to shoot some stuff, just because I needed to get back in the saddle. Just I wasn't going to shoot 16 and not be able to look through the viewfinder, operate for some things. And a couple of shots made it in. But yeah, no, I mean, I love operating, but I am not as good as the people that do it for a living. And we had amazing operators: Matt Moriarty, Cale Fino, just absolute gems, total pros, the best of the best.
Awesome. Well, I feel like I've taken a lot of your time. It's been almost an hour. Before we go, though, do you have any, like, besides just encouraging people to go see Saturday Night, do you have a website or Instagram or anything that you'd like to plug so people could see more of your work, interact with you, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I have both, but I don't even. There's no plugging that needs to be done. It's, it's just there for to share work things, or to be able to be found if somebody needs to reach out or get a hold of me. But no, I mean, I don't. It's not really a promotion thing. Cool. The best thing I'd like to promote is go to the movie. Like, see it in theaters while you can. Like, it's fun. See it with an audience. It looks great on a big screen. Like, I'd love people to go see what 16 millimeter looks like in a theater. It's
I wish we could see an optical blow up of it. I saw it at the Regal in North Hollywood.
No, we did make a 35 millimeter print from the digital file, which looks spectacular. It was playing at the Vista. I don't know where it is now.
I was about to say, was it so you could play it at the New Beverly, but the Vista's Tarantino's other theater?
Same difference. But it was spectacular, and everybody who got to see that was treated to a gift. But it's a fun movie. It's great to see the audience, and it looks really good on screen. It's the way it's supposed to be seen. So if you can, go see it in the theater. But if not, watch it as soon as you can on TV.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming back, man. I can't wait to see what you have next.
Me too. Great chatting with you again.
Yeah, you too.
All right, that was Eric Steelberg. Eric, thank you so much for coming back on the show. I'm really glad that you got to come chat with us about Saturday Night. And Ben, where can people see Saturday Night right now?
Well, it's streaming on VOD pretty much everywhere you get VOD. Your Amazons, your Apples, etc. And it's going to be on Netflix in January.
Excellent. All right. So, Ben, it is bill paying time.
Yay.
It's time to thank our sponsors, the people who make this show possible and make it get going. We have to thank our good friends over at Laowa. Laowa, maker of really incredible entry-level cinema lenses, and even some lenses I wouldn't even call entry-level. They're just really good. They absolutely hit way above the price that it costs to buy them. And one of those sets of lenses that I think that people who are out there looking at anamorphics should be paying attention to are the nanomorphs. The nanomorphs are the lightest weight PL mount anamorphic lenses available right now, and they're really good. Okay, so the nanomorphs, though, are really high performance, really small anamorphic lenses with a 1.5 times squeeze factor, which is fairly universal. And if you've got the ability to de-squeeze that either in your camera or on a monitor, that means you can get very much that big widescreen full frame look at a pretty modest price. The lenses are sharp. The lenses have a little bit of distortion, but not too much, very similar to much higher end, much more expensive lenses. And they have the sort of horizontal flare that's incredibly popular by a lot of filmmakers. Available in 3 colors, an amber, a silver, and a blue. They pretty much have all the bases covered, but the fact that you can get them in PL, you don't have to get them necessarily in a still format mount, although they're in basically every still format mount, I think, including Canon RF, Leica L, Micro Four Thirds, and it is the most Sony E. It's also the most comprehensive set that is available out there, all the way, and they cover Super 35 sensors, and it's for smaller sensors like Micro Four Thirds, starting at like a 20, and it goes all the way up to a significantly longer lens. I'm going to pull that up right now just so I can speak about it intelligently. It is, oh my God, how many focal lengths now? There's a 5 lens bundle, plus there's 2 zooms. The longest is an 80, the widest is a 27 in their full Super 35 coverage, and then you've also got 2 zoom lenses, 28 to 55 and 50 to 100. Take a look at the Laowa Nanomorphs, of course available at Hot Rod Cameras, and they're having a Black Friday sale. So by the time you hear this, that Black Friday sale is probably either about to launch or is launched. And if you go to hotrodcameras.com, I'm sure that we will have it on our homepage. Take a look at the Laowa Nanomorphs. Really, really cool lenses.
Sweet. Awesome.
And now, short ends.
All right, so Ben, it is our short end time of the show. It's the time we talk about our pet obsessions. Do you have something that you're obsessed about this week?
I found an interesting documentary, which you can get on Tubi. It's playing in a few other places, and I'd heard about it, but I'd never seen it. It's called Vampira and Me. And for those people who aren't like me, Vampira was sort of the proto Elvira. In fact, I believe she sued Elvira for stealing her bit. But she was...
Did she win?
I think she did. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But she was a horror host on television and created kind of a goth look for herself, kind of like way back in kind of the early days of television. Probably best known for being in Plan 9 from Outer Space. Like she plays Bela Lugosi's wife, who was also turned into a... whatever they get turned into in that movie. It's sort of like part zombie, part vampire. And it's a really comprehensive interview with her. And it has a lot of interviews with, I hope I'm not butchering her actual name, Mila Nurmi, who was Vampira. And she passed away, I want to say in like 2014 or something like that. But these are interviews that she had done before then. And it's sort of, it's an interesting documentary because it's kind of talking about the early origins of kind of outsider gothy kind of culture before there was a name for it even. But also just kind of the early days of television and what was working in television and how one could stake a claim. And I actually feel like it has repercussions because I feel like you see, right now in our short end today, or excuse me, in our close focus today, we're talking about how people are trying to like put a stake in the ground of AI entertainment. Like, okay, so like look at how someone did it in television in the 1950s. It's just a really interesting story. She's really interesting, and it's a cool documentary, and it kind of goes into a little bit of stuff about Ed Wood and stuff, but it's really about her and her life, and somebody who like we still feel the repercussions of her work today and maybe don't even realize or recognize or acknowledge it on a regular enough basis. And she basically towards the end of her life was penniless. She didn't get like money for all the stuff that she had done or enough money. And it's kind of a bummer how the industry can treat people like that. It's a very similar story, honestly, to Betty Page in that regard, although she wasn't like, she was a different kind of model than Betty Page was. But anyway, it's just a very interesting kind of recent history in entertainment. And it's funny because it's like, it feels like ancient history stuff that happened in the 50s, but it wasn't, it was the birth of television. And I feel like that's why it feels so different,
Yeah. It sounds really interesting and kind of tragic. So
also they always broadcast her live. So there's almost no actual footage of her show.
Oh, wow. Where did you see this documentary?
It's on Tubi, but you can probably find it in a few other places, but it's free on Tubi. But yeah, like they only broadcast her live. So there's like outside of Plan 9 from Outer Space, there's like a minute and a half of footage of what her show looked like.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Interesting. Kind of lost the time.
Yeah.
I assume they got a little bit of footage from it inside of the show or?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think they had all the footage that exists of her. You know,
Oh, wow.
I know I've talked about this on here before, but my father was Bozo the Clown in Miami and then in Orlando. And he worked with huge people. There's actual picture of him working with Jim Henson and Jim Henson's kind of early Kermit the Frog puppet. Because I guess Jim Henson would go around to like local TV shows and peddle his wares to kind of build his profile up. And they did tape the show, but it was inch videotape, and then the next day they would just tape over that. So
It's
like
really expensive.
So like
Exactly.
none of his
Yeah.
shows exist either. You know, like there's literally zero of, you know, he did that show for like 6-7 years, and there's photographs. That's all we have. Anyway, so Ilya, what is your pet obsession this week?
I'm really excited. Silo is back. So I don't know if you watched Silo before.
I did not.
And I don't think everybody out there is as enthusiastic about Silo as I am, but Silo's big in my house. My entire family likes Silo, and the first episode of season 2 just dropped, and it's a massive effing cliffhanger from the end of season 1. And if you didn't read the books, which I didn't, holy crap. It's like you have no idea what's going to happen next. And episode 1 did not disappoint. I'm going to give away nothing, because if you haven't watched Silo, what's wrong with you? And I'm talking to you, Ben.
I haven't watched
You got to
Silo.
try Silo. Unless you've gotten like an aversion to like post-apocalyptic, television series or things like that, you should be watching it. It's really strong, and season 2 starts off as strong as anything from season 1. So
cool.
I'm delighted, and I am. It is, for me, for my money, it's probably maybe the best show that Apple has produced so far.
Whoa.
And I know they've produced some winners, but I think
Better
Silo is
than
fantastic.
The Morning Show, better than Ted Lasso.
I think so. I like
wow.
it more than both of those shows, but and I also
Better
really
than The
like
Foundation?
Severance. I never watched The Foundation, so I can't speak to that. But I know that's got some fans. But yeah, The Foundation never clicked with me. So I tried one episode and never went back.
Yeah.
But Silo, incredible, and I mean, look, it should be a good season. I'm excited. So short and sweet, short end for me this week, but really glad for Silo. If you haven't seen Silo, check it out.
All right, so where can people find you if they're looking for you online and they want to know more about Silo? They want to talk to you.
The easiest way to talk to me is probably through one of the flavors of social media that I'm connected with, but also you can reach out to my company, Hot Rod Cameras, sponsor of this show, purveyor of all kinds of fine camera equipment, cameras, lenses, lighting, you name it, hotrodcameras.com. Ben, where can people find you?
You can find me at benrock.com. Exactly the way it sounds. I don't need to spell it. I'm not gonna. And you can check out all my stuff there and learn all about me. Also, come find me on Blue Sky. I'm Neptune Salad on Blue Sky, and I gotta say, I'm never really like on the pulse. I'm never on the exact. I'm not the guy who's like, oh yeah, I'm either like 2 years ahead of the curve or 5 years behind it. I'm never like right there. But I think that I had to say, I didn't know that people were suddenly flocking to Blue Sky. I was just like,
1 million people a day right now.
I was like, I think I'm done with Twitter. It's so toxic and gross. And so, and I already had Blue Sky, so I'm like, I'll just start following people and see where it goes. And, but like, yeah, and I had 12,000 followers on Twitter, and I'm noticing about 100 a day of them are gone, just gone, not unfollowing me, but have vanished. And I just think people are leaving Twitter en masse. And Blue Sky so far pretty non-toxic, pretty not full of bots, not full of spam porn, not or porn spam, I guess, like not full of the stuff that made Twitter feel kind of icky. And it's real easy when somebody comes up and is weird, you can just mute them or block them. And it's really, the tools are there to make it a better experience for yourself. People are saying it's more of a bubble. I don't know. Maybe it is, but I'm mostly just talking to people about movies and shit. So who gives a crap? Anyway.
Sounds awesome.
Ilya, who do we need to thank before we wrap this thing up today?
Hey, we got 3 people that we always thank, and we should definitely thank them again. First off, Kays Alatrachi.
Yay.
Kays, who made the music that you listened. So giving him top billing today.
I saw Kays last night. I saw.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's making a short film, and he wanted to blow my head up in it. So I don't really
Wow.
act, but he asked me if I would be in the scene so that my head could be blown up. And he knew what to say to me to make me want to be in it. I'm like, you're going to blow my head up? I'm there. And yeah, we it was just him and me.
Like increase in size or like explode?
Explode, like scanner style. Like,
okay.
He's Cronenberging my head. It'll be great. Anyway.
Okay, we got to thank Michael Dispenza. Michael, whose job we hopefully didn't make too hard this week. Yeah. He is slicing and dicing, editing these episodes and getting them out there for us. Thank you, Michael. And of course, last but never least, Alana Cody. Alana, who is our producer and is putting together all of these episodes and the interviews and the schedule, most importantly, in a time right now, because it's award season. Holy crap. I know she's got a lot going on. There's a lot of stuff that you and I both have to watch, and there's a lot of interviews that we have to conduct.
I had a big one that I had to see the other day for an interview I'm doing in 2 days.
Exciting. All right, Ben, that just about does it for us. You take us out.
Thanks for tuning in.
It's growing on me. It's working.
It's okay.
This has been the Cinematography Podcast, presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory on the web at hotrodcameras.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our show on iTunes and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.